You're listening to Japanese Baptist Church in Seattle, Washington.
Welcome to a new episode of JBC Connect. I am happy to introduce our next guest, who is Daniel Kytonen, a local artist in Seattle, and a friend of mine who's also been an artist in residence at JBC. He helped us put on an amazing meditative service. It was like an audio-visual kind of thing that we did together. And I've never participated in something like that, so it was really a great experience. And Daniel's a very accomplished artist, but he also does ministry with IVCF, University of Washington. So he inhabits a lot of different worlds. So I thought it'd be nice, Daniel, before we get started, for folks who don't know you very well, maybe if you could just tell a bit about yourself. And I've given a very broad overview, but maybe just who is Daniel Kytonen for our listeners?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to talk. Also the doing the performance was awesome. It was, I feel like, as much an adventure for me as it was for you. So super cool to get to do that. Hopefully we can do some more stuff like that in the future. But
Definitely.
So what should I talk about myself? I guess I grew up in Spokane, and I've lived throughout the state. I went to UW for my undergrad. I got my degree in visual arts, got a BFA. And then after college, my wife, May, who you may know, we both went on staff with InterVarsity and then kind of moved throughout the state. We were in Pullman for a year, then went back to Spokane for 4, and then a little over 2 years ago came back to Seattle. So there's been a lot of circuiting around. As a person, I like lots of stuff. I tend to find rabbit holes of things to learn about. I have ADHD, so I think that's part of the gift and curse of that is I'm curious and end up probably learning about more things than I need to. So end up following lots of random stuff. But I think that is kind of a component of my art too, in finding things that might not normally fit together, and being curious about connections between things.
I think that's actually a great segue into something I did want to discuss, because I think one of my first conversations with you, I really enjoyed it because you juxtapose all these different worlds very, very freely and very fluidly. You can bring in a lot of different perspectives, and it just makes a lot of sense. Like, I feel like you're a very accomplished artist in your own right. You strike me as very prolific, but at the same time, like you've got a very involved ministry in faith, and I was just curious that if you wanted to explore that more. Of like, it seems like you really like integrating things, like bringing things in from different places. When we did our visual art performance, like you were drawing it from a lot of disciplines, it was very easy to work with you because I felt like there was nothing unusual for you to put together. So like collaboration seems very natural to you. So maybe you want to talk a bit more about that, like how you integrate things.
Yeah, well, I definitely say I'm not prolific. I think it's funny. A lot of times I think on the outside, people are like, wow, you're doing a lot of stuff. And what it is on our side is like, it's definitely not prolific. It feels like, lots of random little things that I got going on. Sorry, what was the...
Oh, just like how you integrate things together. Talk a bit more about like how you like to connect, how you're talking about like how you're curious, like bringing art, faith, and like things from the outside.
Oh yeah, that is interesting. I was actually thinking about this. Yeah, the two main roles that I occupy are obviously ministry and doing art. It's a weird. They're both not super hospitable to each other. So that's a weird juxtaposition that I kind of have to hold in my person. yeah, like being an artist in a faith space, and especially for someone who's trying to kind of dig deeper into contemporary art and like where art and culture intersect, and kind of what I believe are like the prophetic things art has to say to culture. That can be a suspicious discipline within the church, um, and something that takes translating and is uh, not always like received. But then on the flip side, like when I'm in my art worlds, the same thing is true with like being a person in ministry, where for good reason too, a lot of people have experienced a lot of damage from the church, and um, art tends to be a place where people, the expectation is that they can go to kind of heal from experiences like that. Uh, yeah, so those, in terms of like kind of bringing those two core things together, it's definitely still a question because they're so disparate. Yeah, and kind of suspicious of each other, and it's weird to have that be like both those things in my person, and even in myself. How do I like reconcile those two things together? Has been an ongoing question. Um,
Yeah, no, so I am super interested in this discussion that you brought up because,
yeah.
I'm just like you, right? Like I also like produce and create music
Hmm.
outside of the church world, so I don't explicitly call it Christian music or,
Hmm.
worship music or something. And um, I don't, I don't think I would label your work as like Christian church art or anything like that. I don't
Yeah.
think of it like that at all, but it's deeply personal and deeply spiritual, right?
Hmm.
And and then it's not like we're not creative in ministry, but it's not like we're trying to cram our art into our ministry or we use it to promote ourselves or anything like that, right? So
Yeah.
I feel the same tension as you, right? Because like we have this, we want this separation because of all the baggage on both sides, but at the
Hmm.
same time, like we're one person, right? So it's integrating.
Hmm.
Um, do you want to talk about maybe a time where you found like it was interesting that like you made some interesting connections as a bridge between the two worlds?
Um, yeah, there's definitely been lots of interesting moments. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that well, this is actually one of my favorite stories from when I was a student.
Hmm.
It was kind of like the first thoughts of I was probably in my junior year,
Hmm.
uh, being like, I need to like figure out some way for God to be a part of my process of like making stuff, and remember like wrestling with that quite a bit because like the instruction and stuff I was receiving was like pretty critical or antagonistic towards just Christian ideas. But in my soul, I was like these things are there, so I have to figure out something. But during that time, I just started praying, like while I was painting, and just asking God to like give me more freedom while I was working, and was like experiencing that in the process of, we were just working on still lifes at that time. Um, and I remember during a critique, one of the professors was like, it was a one-on-one. Um, she was like, "I'm really interested by your like newest paintings." We were talking about it. She was like, "It seems like there's a lot more freedom in what you've been working on." And I was like, immediately like, "What the heck?" And like, as I was praying for this thing, this other person was experiencing kind of the process I was going through. And so I was kind of like baffled that she was seeing that. And then she was kind of like asking like, "Oh, why do you think that changed, or what changed for you?" And yeah, I was like, well, I started praying, and I was like pretty nervous to even bring that up. And she was like, oh, cool. Like, what are you praying? Or like, do you believe in a certain thing? And I was like, yeah, I follow Jesus. And then like immediately the conversation was over. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, even that dichotomy of like, this person was actually experiencing the work that God was doing in my soul through the thing I was working on. And uh, was like in touch with that and affecting them. But as soon as it got labeled like as a part of a process that was happening with Jesus, the interest was over. So simultaneously, like, wow, you're actually experiencing what I intended and what was happening for me. But as soon as it got labeled as a Christian thing, that process was shut off. Um, so yeah,
That's
that
a
was a
great story. Wow. I mean, there's
wild
so much to
experience.
that story, right? I think that shows the great tension between it. I was thinking of like one story for me when I was in Liverpool. It was like an open mic for like artists and poets and stuff to just come in and share their work. And I intentionally went to this because I knew nobody in there. I was studying music at the time in Liverpool, and I went in and like I was also the only Asian. Like there was
Yeah.
everyone was white, right? It's Liverpool, right?
Mhm.
So I just come in and I sing this song, and this song I won't say it's like explicitly Christian, but it's deeply like spiritual for me, and it just talked a lot about surrender. Um, and I just sang it, and it was interesting. At the end of it, the room was dead quiet,
Mhm.
and the moderator kind of came up and says, "Oh, sorry, I just need a moment." After he sang that, I just need a moment,
Mhm.
and it was so interesting because I really felt like I had this holy moment with everyone. I could really feel like God had somehow done something. I don't even know what it was, right? But like it just felt very like a holy,
Yeah.
sacred time, and people were participating in it. And it's
Yeah.
kind of funny how, like what you talked about, how art is this weird kind of thing that transcends like our boundaries,
Mhm.
um, and it can be really disarming. It can be this common ground where we can communicate
Yeah.
higher things. Yeah, that's really special.
Yeah, totally. And it's just I I think it's really healthy for us as Christians, like we get so entrenched in a Christian culture and start to take for granted like things like or words that we assume mean something and can't like actually articulate the reason behind them or the
Hmm.
value. And um it's possible for someone to like experience the value behind like um I don't know what an example would be. Um but like to experience the process of something happening and not even know that it's connected. Um Yeah, so I think that is really interesting, and, yeah, even hearing you talk about that, I feel like I've seen and heard lots of other people, where maybe people are having an experience with God and don't even know it,
Hmm.
through the work or being healed or, I don't know, something happening in their soul.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of the elements, a lot of the elements that are involved with like a deep, meaningful interaction with art is very like a lot of similar elements with prayer, right? I
Mhm.
feel I've gone to galleries where it feels like it's just a very sacred spiritual moment, and
Yeah.
I I think there's really something to that, and I think if there are faith people who can like not like force people through it, but like help navigate, or like be a fellow journey as a fellow journey person through it.
Mhm.
It's a really special opportunity uh, that I can't do from the pulpit. It's a very unique quality that is just very unique,
Yeah.
which is actually a great segue into because I don't want to lose this connection because it's really
Yeah.
exciting. You're doing a really cool art project right now that I've been just so fascinated by on your Instagram. Um, could you just tell us a bit about it? Like, what's it called, and what you're doing with that?
Yeah, I'm I I labeled it Spirit Gates just for the kind of keeping track of things on Instagram, but I'm not sure that
Mhm.
that's the name that I'm gonna land with. Just yeah, and having like learning differences, the language aspect of art and how those connect has been something I wrestle with. So I think the longer I go on, the more comfortable I feel with like names changing and stuff. But
Mhm.
that's probably not great. For like well I'm not like represented by a gallery or anything so it doesn't really matter but um yeah uh but yeah so and this project about the spirit gates what it's called now maybe not in the future uh is kind of a accumulation or continuation of stuff I've already been thinking about or process I've had but kind of took it a step further. um so the work is oil paintings on this plastic. It's called Duralar. It's very similar to like the old school overhead projectors. That same plastic. I found a place where I can buy like giant rolls of it. Um, yeah. So um, the first roll I got, I think, was from an actual overhead projector that I probably stole from UW. Sorry, UW, but I didn't think you needed it anymore. That
I
was
think
how I
it'll
got
take.
started. Yeah. Uh, yeah. And then spent some years searching for that plastic, and then it's popped up on the internet. But yeah, I've been painting on that for some time now, and they're pretty abstract. I've always been drawn to kind of abstract stuff, just because there's kind of a conversation that happens back and forth between what it's becoming and like what I intend, and I really like that process of the speaking back and forth. Um, but yeah, so these pretty abstract paintings on this Duralar, so it's transparent plastic, and so the places that I paint kind of has a stained glass effect where it's translucent, but the color still comes through. And then the unpainted places are totally transparent. So I had this idea kind of right at the I had the idea of putting stuff out in nature for a little bit and had tried it a couple times, but when the coronavirus stuff happened, it felt like a really good opportunity to kind of investigate that more. And kind of what propelled it, honestly, was I needed to be outside and be like physically active. And with lockdown happening, I was like, I have to figure out a way to um, do that that's safe. And um, yeah, it just felt really important for me to not just be sitting inside but still being safe. And that was kind of what inspired the taking them out into nature and kind of exploring a little bit more that
Mhm.
process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like this is, I mean, this because we were just talking about this whole thing about like art in between worlds and
Hmm.
translate, and I feel like this is a perfect embodiment of it in a way, right? It's like um, taking these translucent pieces of art and putting them out in the world, and a lot of them are nature, but I think there was a couple that weren't necessarily like a nature scene. It was like an urban environment as well, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The beginning ones, as I like took more pictures, I was like, I want to go deeper into the woods, and kind of even the journey of getting to like hike somewhere or find somewhere became kind of a part of the process.
mhm,
But yeah, some of them are in the city, and I've had the thought of like wanting them kind of in more urban landscapes as well.
yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because they're translucent, and the way that you kind of hold them up, like you can't really see the string very well, so it almost looks like it's just hovering there.
Hmm.
And I actually really love the name Spirit Gate because they do. It sort of looks like this ghostly kind of weird thing where you don't expect it. It's just this kind of weird, like, oh, there's this kind of like artistic, creative, spiritual apparition that kind of has appeared where you wouldn't expect it, you know? And
Yeah.
it just starts you thinking about all kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too part of the thought with the spirit gate, like it itself as a square or a rectangle represents a passageway.
Mm.
And I was interested too to try to find actual paths to begin with as
Ah,
a like it's leading you into it, and kind of as a representation of a door or something physically. But and during that time, I remember just feeling like I think whenever there's a big shakeup in your life, you kind of feel more awake to just spiritual stuff in general. So with the coronavirus stuff, it felt like a kind of collective like shake for a second of maybe people being more open to spiritual stuff,
mhm.
and kind of wanted to try to capture a bit of that moment. So that was part of that too. And it just I remember feeling so strange, like um just yeah, with everybody being inside. And at that those first like 3 weeks, people were pretty intense about it. So when I would go on a bike ride or something, there would really not be many people. And I went to Stewart Park a few times, and maybe other people saw this too, but just when the grass was really long, it felt like nature was kind of reclaiming its space. There was,
Right.
uh, yeah, different. It didn't feel like a city anymore. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So getting to even be out and kind of
Yeah.
explore, and um, that was another thing that has felt really important. That I was like, I need to find another way to have this kind of sense of adventure in my life
Yeah.
in the midst of like everything being closed. Um, yeah, and being able to find that and feeling like there was kind of a new world emerging, like all around me, that was what I thought was familiar was becoming like kind of unfamiliar.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about your artwork too is like I feel like it was it's I mean the painting itself, right? On the Duralex is or sorry, what is it Duralex you said?
Duralar,
Duralar, sorry, on
Duralar.
Duralar is very compelling in itself, but it takes a lot of work to set these up, right? You're gonna have to go on a journey somewhere. You're gonna have to like position it, and I feel like that was just that in itself is just very compelling. Like it was almost like a meditative process, and you're kind of like snapping the whole journey of it. Like the actual painting itself is only like a small portion of it. It's like the whole thing, like
Yeah,
going out, finding locations, setting it up, and then you're talking about observing your environment.
yeah.
Um, did you feel like it was because you how many of these spirit gates have you done now?
Um, I think I've done about 15 different shots, but some of them I didn't like as much.
Okay.
So not all of them are on my
Uh-huh.
Instagram,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, quite a few.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, that just made me think too of like there was lots of good stuff that happened in the moment of like when it's windy, it's blowing everywhere, and I have to kind of
Hmm.
just sit and wait for it to stop being windy. And
Hmm.
there was this sense of like being brought really close to the present in a way that can be hard because of just the natural circumstances, and like having to time stuff with the sun, having to time stuff with weather, um, having to time it with like the wind, um, was also a really interesting experience, which I think maybe that got captured in the images a little bit, but
Yeah.
probably something people wouldn't think of unless I
Yeah.
said. But
Well, I love this because like I feel like a lot of your art, there's something. I mean, your end product is always impressive to me. I find them to be very passionate, very dynamic. But I'm just as interested in the work and the process that you do to get there because I feel like you're very prayerful and very intentional in the way you do your art. So, like, why I'm just talking about this is because like, I was just thinking, like, Spirit Gate, like, that would be a cool thing to recommend to anybody to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, why
mhm,
don't you do this? Like, if, like, I feel like you have some kind of gig coming up where like you could be like a spiritual art director or something like that. Like you could just like set people because like you've done this with the Fuller Brem Cascadia group, right? You've done some
yeah,
art spiritual exercises, and they've always been very profound and affecting to me. Like I could see like you could tell people like create your own spirit gate, and then we're all going to go
mhm,
on a journey together, and you're going to set them up. And I feel like the whole thing from start to finish is is very affecting. It's very spiritual, and the fact that
yeah.
you've done 15, it's like I can't help but wonder. Like I wonder if you got some kind of like weird like spiritual rhythm or like some kind of um, it became like that's a lot of time, right? That's a big time investment.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like it'd be interesting to kind of track like what this is kind of doing to you over time, setting up beautiful things in weird, random places.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great idea. I might have to borrow that from you. Yeah.
I mean, I was just thinking on the fly. It's just like because that's what I love. I really love Q and A's with you, just talking about tell us like what you're doing and what you're thinking because like there's so much more than what I see in the final product. Even though the final product
Yeah.
is amazing. Um, yeah, which actually maybe I was going to talk about ministry, but because like that's just a huge thing in itself.
Yeah.
It might be cool to do another episode where we dive into that more.
Yeah.
But I did want to actually talk a little bit now I'm thinking of it of our collaboration.
Yeah.
where we did basically you had very similar works, right? Paintings on translucent material, and you set up fans and lights to shine through them. And
Yeah.
then we had kind of like guided meditations as you're just watching this. And then I'm doing like this abstract um, environmental ambient music, I guess. And I felt it was really cool because we had all the stuff prepared, right? But then
Hmm.
even when we rehearsed it, it's never the same thing twice because you have sort of more like movements. You didn't like have a hard choreography of what you're doing. And then
Yeah.
the way I set up my music, um, it's more like loops of phrases and like going through certain sound effects that I'm actually all manipulating in real time.
Yeah.
So I'm not scoring or recording anything beforehand either. So it felt very good. Like I felt like it really fit with what you do because
Yeah.
there's a real fluidity to all the stuff you're doing. And the way I set up my music gear was really just like creating like these sound machines to kind of go along with what you're doing. And I just had a really great time with this, just figuring out and processing all that together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was an awesome combination of stuff just because, like you're saying, I mean, my personal belief about maybe process, and I think it's kind of a bigger statement about how I see the world, is just that we don't have too much control over how things actually play out. Um, and kind of acknowledging that in the process of what I make. And when I do like installations or um, when I like apply to a grant, which is a very like rigid process and they expect a very specific thing, to always when I'm installing something or making something, to always like build in some room for stuff to change, or the expectation that like what um, I think will happen might be different than what actually does. Especially working with like light, um, the more I mess around with it, the more it's like just like things reflecting or refracting, crazy stuff can happen. Even like the at the church when we did the performance, when I had rolled the sheet out on the ground and then the
Yeah.
lights from above were like reflecting this, like it looked like water,
Hmm.
uh, the reflection on the ceiling. Like I would have had no way to plan for that. I mean, maybe I could have if I was really good, but at planning, but I'm not. But yeah, I think there's something beautiful in just waiting for the unexpected or having
Hmm.
space for the unexpected just in the process. So
Yeah.
it's cool to hear that that's part of your music too.
Yeah. And that's and I don't think it's something to feel bad about, like you didn't think of it beforehand. I think like that's just like another beautiful kind of like, I don't know, Daniel Kytonen moment, I feel, because like the way your work is like, I feel all your work is inherently explorational, It's always
Hmm.
like, oh, let's see this, let's try this, and like, hey, that's cool, let's keep going with that. And I think that's really exciting how it keeps evolving. And like it makes sense that like maybe you start at this point, you call it spirit gates, but it's going to turn into this, it's
Yeah.
going to go there, because that's what's so compelling about your work. And I feel like it would be really sad if someone only saw like one snapshot of it. Like you only really get the fullness of your work if you're following all the evolutions and the mutations of it. And
Yeah.
uh and that felt really good to do like improvisational music with you. I feel like I could have easily like canned. I have a bunch of like pre-recorded ambient music I could have just
Hmm.
played, but I don't think it would have been the same. Like I think because you're still exploring even as you're performing.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the sign of like a good jazz artist. In a way. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. And sorry about the phone earlier. I'm in my
Oh no,
office. These things happen. Um,
it's fine.
I suppose we could edit that out later, but you said some really good things while the phone was going off. So,
It's
um, sorry to our listeners, but this is COVID times. What can you expect?
yeah.
Um, yeah, no, and so I guess the last thing I just wanted to kind of respond to too is like I think a lot, just circling back to what we are talking about with prayer and the spirit, right? I mean, a lot of what prayer is about responding to the movements of the spirit, right? like the prophetic movement, how God moves in our lives. If we try and box it in and contain it, and like everything is pre-planned,
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way. It's about this openness, and it's really cool because you like physically embody this very prayerful life by the way you do art. Like you're always open to interruptions or like
Yeah.
like that stuff. It's on the ground, and you look down like, okay, cool. That's gonna be part of the art now, like or something spills over, and you're like, hey, cool, next piece of work. And I feel like, especially in the COVID times, right? Like it's really exposing everyone who is so obsessed with like my way, God. Let's do it my way, and
Mhm.
we need more I guess more teachers to tell us about like, hey, these accidents or these unforeseen circumstances can actually be creative opportunities that make something
Yeah.
really beautiful. And learning like the divine art of improvisation in this time is really key.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I I mean, I love the Prophets for this reason, and I feel
yeah,
like a lot of what they did was performance artwork actually. And
uh-huh. Oh
um,
wow, that's good. Yeah, uh-huh.
yeah, just like the random crazy adventures or weird things God would tell them to do to represent like a symbol. I think it was. I shouldn't I'll get myself in trouble not knowing my Old Testament. Good enough. I think it was Isaiah. Um, with the like loincloth where there was the
Hmm.
series of things that God told
Right.
him to do with it, and it
Uh-huh.
just got weirder and weirder. But kind of the in message, like taking Isaiah through a process of like wear it for 3 months, bury it by the river, um, uncover it. And Isaiah had no idea why this was happening and was just like, yeah, I'll just be faithful and believe that it will make sense at the right moment.
Uh-huh.
And God was using that to like build this metaphor, show Isaiah the ways that Israel had like become dirty in his eye or something. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, makes me think of like that felt like performance artwork, like that
Yeah.
intertwined prayer and
Right.
performance.
Hmm.
And
Right.
yeah, I think there's something that is understood about prayer when it's like uh, embodied, and that can happen lots of ways, like through justice, through art, that makes it the like yeah the metaphysical or spiritual intertwine with the physical that I think our world desperately needs right now.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a great thing because like it's performance, not as like stage or like false kind of thing, but it's like
Yeah.
performance as in like embodying, right? Like really like literally physically getting into it, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's what's so beautiful about your work. It's so embodied, and it definitely feels like it's an ongoing performance. So there's man, this is really good stuff. I really love talking about this.
Hmm.
You know, Dan, we'll definitely talk some more. I want
Yeah.
to talk more about this because um, I love conversations with you, and I had such a good time collaborating. I really do hope that we can figure out another kind of thing to do together in the future.
Yep.
So, and
Look
it,
out
it
for
came together so easy, right? I felt like it was very natural. It didn't seem very forced to me. So,
yeah.
that's a special thing. Um, I'm gonna pause here, and I think I might wrap up here because I think this is a nice segue to move on to further things. But I did want to encourage people to check out Daniel's Instagram. What's your handle on Instagram?
uh Daniel Kyto, it's the
Okay, got
yeah,
it.
Daniel Kyto, I think.
Yeah.
I also have artwork up
Uh huh.
in the Amazon building,
Hmm.
the Wainwright building facing Mercer Street. So it's like one of their storefronts, and it's actually uh, related to the stuff we've been talking about today. So if you want to see it in person, um, you can go to the Amazon building.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yep.
And you're constantly doing other stuff, so I hope we can keep in conversation too. I think there's a lot more to come. I feel like we're just getting started. So
Yeah.
thank you, Daniel, so much for your time.
Yeah.
Man, it's been really really just mind opening, just and heart opening to just like talk with you. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. Also
Yeah.
for all the space that you've made for us.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's my passion. I love talking about how art and spirituality and faith all
Yeah.
come together, and you and me do that so
Yeah.
beautifully. So yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in for this episode,
Yeah.
and we will have more on the way. Thanks for joining us again for JBC
Yeah.
Connect.
Thanks.